Hey there everyone, Hitesh here, back again with another video. Hope you are excited for this one. Here's the thought process. How about we build an entire authentication system? We'll go in the depth of how the authentication is being done using the tokens, JWT tokens, as well as we use cookies for that, server-side safe cookies. And we learn all the inside and basics of how an authentication system can be done using MongoDB, Atlas, of course. And we do all of this within GitHub. Yep. All of this in the GitHub. So GitHub has recently announced the Codespaces feature, which is like you can do everything, whatever you like on within just the GitHub website. And I think this is a fantastic feature. GitHub provides you a couple of different variants of machine. And recently in the GitHub universe, they announced that they are offering a very generous 60 hours per month. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. 60 hours per month as a free offering, which is more than enough for any developer to write a lot of code in just the GitHub. So I think it is a pretty exciting one. So we're going to learn about what are the inner details of this GitHub Codespaces, how you can configure that, what are these containers, and how you can create your own containers, add more features to it, and a little bit more in-depth detail of it, how we can configure environment variables because we have to connect with MongoDB as well, and we cannot just inject our string directly there. So we're going to be learning all through that in this tutorial. Hope you're excited. We are ready to make a lot of mistakes, just like all developers do, ready to debug them and ready to write code for that. So with this, let's get started with the GitHub Codespaces and get on to that. So this is my GitHub and I have logged in already, as you can see. Go ahead, in case you don't have a GitHub account, go ahead and create one. Nothing magical there, just enter email, password, yeah, the regular stuff. So here you can see that they actually gives me a shortcut, start coding instantly with GitHub Codespace. I can go ahead and click on this. Now there are a couple of ways you can type on github.com/codespaces. You will still land up onto this one, or you can just go ahead, click on this and not on this one, and you can click on new repository and can convert or open up repository into a Codespace, or you can hit the new Codespace. Yes, multiple ways, but they actually go ahead and land you up into the same spaces. So I'll just click on to this. And what I really liked is they have this template feature as well. So blank template, happy to see Ruby on Rails on this one. Probably very soon I'll make some tutorials on Ruby on Rails. And we have React, a Jupyter Notebook, Express, Next, all the popular ones are there. But what makes me interesting is, can I convert this blank template and modify it into Express? If I have that much of ability, then I can actually go ahead and work on with anything which is not mentioned here. Probably Vue.js or maybe Flask, whatever makes you interesting with that, you can go ahead and do that. So we'll be working through with that. So what we're going to do is click on this and we'll say that, hey, I want to use a new code space. Now, Codespace is actually tied up closely to your repository. And what it does basically, it spins up a new container. Yes, we're going in that territory of Docker and all these spaces. So it's almost like spin up your own virtual machine. I know Docker is not a virtual machine, but for the basic understanding perspective, it is good. So we spin up a new kind of a computer for yourself. And in that, all of your code in the repository is being pushed in and you can just keep on working within the browser. So that's the basic idea of it. So right now it says what repository you want to search for. It opens up all of my repository, but I have no repository where I want to open up this one. So obviously I have to create a new repository where I can open this up. So let's go ahead and first let's create a new repository so that we can work on with that. So new repository, it will be public, of course, and we're going to say code space, and this one will be auth. So I'll just say code space auth. And let's just say -22. I usually keep the track of all these repositories with the year number. And let's just give it a description. Simply an auth system, totally designed in GitHub Codespace. Let's give it a try. And of course, it says, do you want me to add a README? Let's go ahead and add a README, and also what template you want to use. I want to use a template of Node.js because that will help me not to push my Node module folder because I'm designing everything in here. So license, none is fine. I don't mind it. All right, so this is going to create a repository for me. Of course, the repository has nothing as of now. You can definitely go ahead and push the code. Now, there are a couple of ways how you can open up a new code space. You can click on this code and can just click on Codespace and can start here, create a Codespace on the main branch or whatever the branch you have pushed on. Right now we have just one branch. We can open this up and still you can go ahead and work on new Codespace and you can select your repository. So we can just go ahead and work on here as well. So we're going to say just Codespace auth 22 and it will just select the branch, which region you want to pump in. Southeast Asia looks good because I am in India. So that is how we are going to roll in. And then it also says that what type of machine you want to spin up. I will definitely walk you through that you can restrict the machine, especially in the organization. If you are a part of organization, you can restrict the usage and kind of machine what other members of your team can use, because this might spin up a little bit of bill. We will just go with 2 core, 4 GB RAM, 32 GB. More than enough for us, but you can go up to 64 core. I think that would be overkill for this basic project. So let's go ahead and try to create a Codespace. Now what Codespace does behind the scene, it simply takes a Docker image and just spins it up for you. Now right now it's going to give me a really basic Docker image which has nothing. But the way how you see those templates, these are configured image. For example, some node is installed in someone Python is installed. So this is how basically it goes on. Now this first connecting the Codespace usually takes a little bit of the time, not too much. Now, a couple of more interesting stuff. On the left-hand corner side, you can see the Codespace. And there are settings in your GitHub account. I'll show you that. From which you can actually go ahead and by default you can connect with your local VS Code and it will spin up a Codespace server and you can connect there. That is fantastic. So this is the basic what we have right now. Now, if you click on this hamburger menu and click on view, and you can open up this command palette like this, or everybody remembers the shortcut Command Shift P or Control Shift P, it opens it up. Now, when you start typing Codespace, notice there are so many of the things. Add a dev container configuration file, configure the dev container. So there is so much that you can go ahead and do this. What I would like to say is simply, I'll just say escape, Command Shift P. And I will say I want to configure dev container feature. So this is what helps you to configure your dev container. Right now on the left-hand side on this menu, the controllers where you see all your files, File Explorer. So you don't see anything at all. But behind the scene, a configuration file of this dev container is present, which is not shown to us. The moment you present this menu, which is configure dev container, it allows you to configure your particular dev container. So what we're going to do is we're going to just click on this. Now it will say no configuration file found. Obviously right now it is not there, but I want to add a file. The moment you did this, now it opens up that, hey, what kind of image you want to roll out. So these images don't come from the Docker Hub. They come up from the image repository of Microsoft itself. So you can just roll out what you want to really do. So core Debian, maybe you want to learn about the Debian and just the Git installed. Maybe you want to go for Go and Postgres, maybe just Go. So it's GitHub. They are not selling short in what could be installed and what could be done. They have pretty much anything to everything what you can imagine and think. I hope so. If not, you can just go ahead and drop down that image as well. We're going to go ahead and say node. So notice here there's a node and MongoDB container. I would love to use a basic node, and we will not be using anything after that. So let's just go ahead and see what all the features. So we have Node and TypeScript, Node and Postgres, Node and JavaScript. So develop Node.js based application include Node.js, linting, NVM, and Yarn. I think that makes sense to us. We don't want to go for Azurite and all that, probably later on in some videos. Right now, this makes sense. So I'll just select on this one. Which version of the node you want to install? You can go ahead and choose any one. I think the 16, which is Bullseye, latest one is good, but we can go for 18 version as well. I think 16 is good enough for our application to be built up. And then optionally, you can install more things onto it. Maybe you are working with AWS CLI, you want all the features there. Maybe you want to configure some of the environment variables. Yes, you can go ahead and do all of this. But there is a lot. There is a lot. Whatever you want, linting, Fastly, whatever you want, there's a list. And every time I check this out, I had the access of Codespaces from the day one. I have seen just this list getting bigger and bigger. For example, if I can just go ahead and say, hey, I want to see the Docker. from the command palette, Command Shift P, you can access the Docker commands after that. So in case you want to have this, you can go ahead and use this. We can also go ahead and install some GitHub CLI, whatever you wish. I will optionally install one. We won't be using it, but I still want to use AWS or maybe Docker, whichever you want. So just to show you that how it looks like in the configuration file, nothing else, nothing more. So we'll be saying Docker in Docker, create a child container inside a container. No, we don't want to do that. I'll just checkmark any one of them. Again, repeating, I will not be using it. I'll just say, okay, it will ask you to rebuild your images. So adding dev container configuration file, then it will ask you to rebuild. Because previously you had nothing, now you're using an image which is having the node install. So it will take your code, build your image again, and will put it up. So pretty simple. Rebuild, and you can rebuild. And this usually takes just a few seconds, not too much, or I can fast forward this using video editing magic. All right, so container took tiny bit of time to rebuild, and probably that's going to be same for you as well. I will first open up the command palette and will say that I want to go for settings. And actually I can just press command and comma to open up the settings, search for font. This font is too small. 12 is not gonna cut through in the tutorial especially. I think we need to go really big. 32 should be good enough so that you can see all the files and all these things. Yep, this should be more better. And by the way, the videos are in 4K, so you can go ahead and bump the resolution a little bit in case you are finding it tiny bit difficult. All right, so let's close this one up here. So understanding this file is the most important because inside this dev container, you have just one file and you can have all these things installed and everything is going to be configured majorly just from here. And there's one more place I'll walk you through with that. So notice here, the image is Node.js, and I told you that the image actually comes up all from here. That is nice, from Microsoft repository, not from the GitHub, not from the Docker hub. Okay. So dev container, everything is fine. And you can add more features. So I think we can just click on view and I want word wrap. There we go. So we can add more features. We can add more forwarded port. Let's just say, for example, this application will be up and running on port, which port you want to go for this one. Let's just say that we want to go for 4000. So you can just go ahead and mention 4000. But in case you want to open up more ports, you can go ahead and work on with that. Right now it's saying that ports, yes, we have to provide the host port. I think that should be it. And why is it giving me squiggly red lines? My bad. Comma shouldn't be there. And we can provide a comma and can list of more ports. Maybe you want to open it on 3000 also, so you can go ahead and do that. Right now it is giving me some problems. Ports are forwarded from the container, can be integrated port number. Yeah, that seems fine. I didn't do much. And once this all is being done, we can actually fire up some of the post created command because maybe it's a node application. So you want to run npm install or yarn install, whatever that is. So all you have to do is just simply uncomment this and this will also work. So I'll just comment it out again. Probably there's a comma missing here for the settings. Yeah, there we go. Modify this file very carefully. This may mess up your code space. You may want to fire up a new code space. Good thing is it doesn't mess up with any of your repository files and anything. So if I go up here, forward ports, that's fine. Post created, we got that. There is also a customization configuration that you can do some of the tools specific to that. For example, maybe you want to load up more of plugins or extension that are being installed. You can actually go ahead and do that and make it in the container. I can also go ahead and install more of these extension. So for example, maybe another extension I want to use is Prettier. I can just search for it and Prettier could be installed up here. And that is one of the greatest things about it, that I can go ahead and work on with any one of that. So Prettier is now installed and configured, so I can just work with that. By the way, in case you want, you can click on this settings icon and copy the extension ID. And I'll show you one more thing up here, which is really interesting, which is Github Codespaces, add extension. So if you look for this documentation, they actually walk you through that how you can actually install these extensions. So you can just click on this and just have this installation. By the way, there are settings available. I need to probably look for it a little bit, how to add them in the code space. I will walk you through. There's nothing much more. It's just the settings you have to add. The syntax we need to find out. I'll walk you through with that. Don't you worry. Okay. So this is it. This is basics of how the dev container works on. So let me just go ahead and close this one. You get the idea. It's not a really complex file. Pretty easy. We can add more tools up here. All right. Looks good. And let's just go ahead and close this one. Let me open up the terminal as well, just like we open it up in the VS Code. Now, only thing you have to be a little bit careful. This is a really small terminal. So I'll just go for terminal. And there is a font setting here in the terminal as long as I remember. And just give me a second. So into the terminal. Yep, here it is. And if I go ahead and search for font, terminal font, there we go. 12 is definitely not going to cut through. I think 28 should be good enough. Too big. I think 22 would be good enough. Yeah, still visible. All right, so this is our terminal, and a couple of things that you should know about this terminal is this entire code space is filled up with some default variables as well, environment variable, and you can actually go ahead and echo that. So we can just go ahead and say code space, and I think it's a code space name. And yeah, this gives me the name of this code space. This would be helpful for me for visiting it through the browser, which I'm already in. So this is one. And there are a couple of more variables up here that is mentioned in the documentation. So you can actually go ahead and say GitHub underscore, I think name or username, something like that. So I think it's username, username, and GitHub username. So there are a couple of variables like this. We can go ahead and echo that. I'll walk through. Let me just go ahead and quickly check that what's the name of the other GitHub variables. Found it. Again, everything comes from the documentation. It's not like I'm making up these things. Everything is mentioned up here. You can see that this is what I was talking about, code space name. There is also GitHub user, not the username or user or the name. It's just the GitHub user. I can go ahead and run these variables as well. So we have GitHub user, so that it gives the user. And it has also the access of GitHub token. I will not show it, but it's a signed token. That means any authentication or anything that you want to do, actually you can go ahead and do with that. Server URL, repository, GraphQL. So the general good practice that they mention in the documentation is do not prefix any of your environment variable with the name of Codespace or GitHub, because they might add it up later on and your application might crash. Just a general thumb rule. So nothing to be worried too much on that part. So yeah, that's the basic. So make sure you keep an eye on this one. And another tab where you should keep an eye is the number of ports. Right now, your application doesn't have any port, but GitHub Codespace is really smart to add a port in which your application is listening. Remember, Codespace is entire a sandbox or a Docker image or a container, whatever you like to call it. Sandbox would be a great term. And it opens up the one port only for the entire world to actually listen on your application. So that's how it works. And we'll walk you through with that. Okay. So the first thing that I would like to do is open up the terminal and would like to install a couple of things. So first of all, we're going to go ahead and say npm init, and we're going to just go with -y for all the default option. All right, so this ran, took a little bit time, don't know why, but it is there. Now we have this package.json file, which is having all the details. So it's saying, hey, I'm expecting there should be an index.js file. I'll just run a start script here that is going to just by default run index.js. Yes, you can go ahead and install NodeMon or go into watch mode of latest Node.js. Nothing to be worried on that. You can actually go ahead and work on with that. There's also a bugs and homepage for that is given to us directly, README and issues. So yes, a couple of more settings are given to you. Oops, by the way, have to be very careful about these code spaces. I accidentally hit the back button. It just went poof, gone. So again, a learning curve that it might happen to you. So going to take a little bit of a second. Let me pause the video in that time. All right, back. Once you hit the back button, it actually just kills your entire container. So here's a small feedback for the GitHub team in case you are watching. Once somebody exits the code space, please add a pop-up that are you sure really want to exit. But this brings me to another point. We have this package.json, which is saved now. I also expect that there should be an index.js. What we're going to write in that, we'll discuss that a little bit later. But right now, let's just say we have index.js, and I can go ahead and use my suggestions, which is console log. And I'll be saying that hello to Codespace. Spaces. All right. So this is what we got as of now. But notice here, I have a couple of these changes being made. If I go back onto this repository and hit a reload on this one, which is actually repository for Codespace auth 2022. It was made 23 minutes ago, which is really long. So we can see that there was no commit being made. This, we can come to a conclusion that whatever you do inside the code space, it doesn't really actually affect your code repository. You have to explicitly go ahead and mention or do a commit here. So obviously we can go ahead and use a commit here. There are multiple ways how you can go ahead and do that. Obviously, you can go ahead and do that with the terminal. It's a Git. It comes up by default as installed with Git, obviously. But you can go ahead and click on these source control. And these are all the files which you would like to add for the staging. So I'll just say, hey, add this one. Also, I would like to add the package.json. And also, I would like to add dev container. Since I have a default git ignore, that's why it is not going to install or just keep these node modules and everything for me. So that is not going to happen. It happens behind the scene. I'm really not worried. Once all of these are staged or available for the stage, I'll just write a message that is going to say simply setup of GitHub Codespace, and I'll just hit a commit. And this is going to sync some of these changes. And after this, that would make my life a lot easier. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure if you click up here, notice here all these are there, but it is recommended that you go ahead and sync the changes as well, so that this will push all of the things and will pull all the original. Maybe there are multiple people who are working on that. So I really want to update my all of these things. So this will bring me all the changes, other people's push and everything. I don't want to run it periodically. I'll do it manually because I'm the only guy who is doing all of this. I'll hit a refresh on this repository and you can see all the codes are there. The advantage of pushing this dev container is that when somebody new guy comes up, he can actually work on with all the settings of the container that I have added. He don't need to configure again the node images, which image I'm using. All of my team member can actually use the same image. Also, I have opened up the forwarded port. In fact, I can go ahead and add up what are the extensions of VS Code that we are using, what linting we are using. All of this, we can go ahead and do that. So that is fantastic, going ahead and working with that. Couple of more things I would like to show up in here. So this is the place where you go ahead. I'm pretty sure this might be bugging a lot of you that, hey, where we can keep our environment variable. If we go ahead and put it up there, then it might be lost in another time. And if we push it onto the GitHub, that would be really bad. So yes, there is a feature of that. You can go into the settings of that particular repository. There is a way you can go into your account setting and can put up global variable that may be shared in multiple repository, of course, with your permission, or you can go ahead into settings. And here inside this code space, I was able to find these pre-built configurations. So let's just set up a pre-built configuration for the code space. So select the branch on which you want to do, and we can actually go ahead and find some of these configurations here. So let me just quickly have a look of where the variables are there. All right, found it. Actually, I was looking at the code spaces, had to zoom up a little bit. It was too small for me. So let me zoom this a tiny bit more. Yeah, this is better now. So if I go into the secrets, I click on this, and now I can set up the secrets in the code spaces. It's not in the code spaces, it's in the secrets, and code spaces should be in the code spaces. I don't know what's the menu, but we can add the secret. So new repository, the secret name, let's just say is going to be port, and it's going to be 4000. So I can just install the .env and can refer it to process.env, and it will get my environment variable. Similarly, this is actually shared on repository, this one only. but actually you can go ahead and use the same settings into your profile. So if you go into your settings, you will find similar thing here, the secrets. And I think here they are placing it inside the code spaces. So yeah, somewhere here. Or maybe somewhere here. So yeah, here it is, new secret. So once you add this new secret, it is actually shared on which repository you can share, and you can share it into multiple repository. So there are two ways how you can add variables, one globally in your profile, which will be shared in multiple repository, or the repository level. Just, you get the idea. You get the idea how this is being done. So I'll just go back onto this one and we'll search for my repositories. So I'll just zoom out a little bit. Yep, that is making much more sense now. All right, so this is my repository. So let me go on to my profile, find the repository so that we can check out other things one by one. All right, so this is the only thing that you need to know about the settings and the dev container. So this is super helpful. And again, you can also configure the pre-default environment that whenever somebody comes up, it just needs to install and all of these things. So your Codespace secrets have been saved and we have to reload to apply. So I'll just reload. And yes, this reloading is sometimes painful, but majority of the time it's really fast and smooth. Depends on how much changes you have made. All right. Now, a couple of more interesting stuff in the terminal itself. Obviously, we are going to use Express. So there are a couple of packages that we'll be using to build this application. So let's go ahead and install them up here. Nothing big deal. We're going to be saying, hey, I want to install Express. That is obviously going to be there. We are going to use Mongoose as our ORM to interact with the MongoDB. We will be using JSON Web Token to create tokens. Really, we'll be going into documentation as well. And we will be using .env so that we can configure the environment variables and all these things if we want to, or we want to use the Codespace direct variables. And we will be setting things up or transferring this token into the user's cookies. So we need an access of cookie as well. By the way, I can show you the package name as well. So the another one that we'll be using is cookie-parser. Yeah, that is the one. So cookie parser, yep, that's the cookie parser package we'll be using. So I can just paste it up here. And yep, this, yes, please allow. Let me paste this. Okay, you need to give permission for this one. So, okay, acceptable. And once we have cookie parser, another one, we are going to encrypt our passwords before saving to the database. So for that, we will be using bcrypt.js. Feel free to use Node.js direct crypto modules or something like that. I will be just going with the bcrypt.js. Easier way, easier syntax. All right, so let me just paste that. There we go. And I think as of now, that's it. If we are going to need anything else, we are going to go ahead and come back here. The advantage that I get here is it's direct server to server talk. It's a server speed. So the installation I have noticed are significantly faster compared to any local machine. Really awesome. That is something that I love. Only thing you have to be cautious about, you have to keep on committing the things. Otherwise, it will all be gone. So we can see all the dependencies are here and they are fine. But I have to go up here and have to look up for all the package files that I want to stage. Lock file, of course, and I want to lock this package.json. Load this. So added dependencies. So I'll just commit that. And I don't need to sync change because I think I am on the latest branch as of now. So that is all what we have. All right. So this is the basics and we will come back onto this one. First, what we're going to do is we are going to create a new file. So let's just go up here and we'll be saying that, hey, give me an app.js. So this is what we need. We'll be keeping all of our files into, or all of our code into app.js, but we're going to export all of this into index.js. So that the only thing that our index.js does is just listen. So let's import the express. We're going to go ahead and say const express. And that is going to come up from require. I love these shortcuts and everything coming up. And I don't believe I'm directly writing up here. So I'll just have an express. And then we're going to create a simple app. So we're going to say const app that is going to be express. And that's basically it. Now we have Express being used as a simple app that I can say. Now all I have to do is export this app so that I can listen, and there is a separate listening in my file. So I'm going to go ahead and say module.exports, and that is going to be app. Now my app will be available to every single place. So what I want to do next is on index.js, I want to listen. I'll be saying app, and this one is going to be the easiest one of all. All we are going to do is first import this app. Let's not do console log here. We'll be saying const app, and that will be coming up from require, and that will come up from the same directory app. There we go. And once we have this, then we are going to listen on to a port. So let's just say app.listen, and we'll be saying that, hey, here is your, we need to grab the port variable. And for that, we need to actually require the env up here as soon as the app is up and running. So that is the basic. Let's go ahead and work on with that. All right, let me show you the documentation as well. Otherwise, we are not learning. So what we have installed is .env. That's the package to load the environment variable from the env file or from any of the application that you're using. The installation we have done, and now we can set all these variables, which we did. And after that, you can import them just like this .env config, or you can just mention this one. So whatever makes sense. This one is making more sense to me. I'll come back and load this up. Now the entire variables are available to all of my files. So what I can do is I can go into index and I can say that, hey, I want to grab a simple variable that is port from this env. So all of the variables are available like this, process.env. And then the name of it. So we called it as port. So we'll be extracting this variable. We'll be saying something like const extract this as port, and then we'll be storing that. Nice. And now we can use this variable port, and then we can go ahead and fire a callback as well. And we can say that simply server, or we can use the backticks. We'll be using a console log, use a backticks. And we'll be saying server is listening. Hope that is correct for listening or running. Bad in spellings. Running at port and then a colon, inject the variable just like this, and a port. So things should be good now, at least in theory. And only thing to test them out is declare a dummy route so that we know that if somebody visits the home route, we are actually sending them some message. The way how we do it is really simple. App has a lot of methods like get, it has post, lot of methods. We will make a get request, and that request will come up onto the slash, which is the home route. And we're going to go ahead and work on with this one, a simple callback. This has an access to request and a response, so that somebody makes a request, all the variables, everything that they pack up comes to me, and I can send a response. In this one, I won't be making a fancy response. We will do it later on. Res.send, and that's it. And we'll be sending up a simple response, but we'll wrap it up into h1. Yes, we are allowed to do so. And we'll be saying simple h1 so that it's nice and big and we can see that. And we can see that server is working. All right. But before I actually test this out, I would like to save my files and my changes. So let's do a commit. It actually encourages timely commit all these messages and everything. So all these files are there. And I'll be saying first get, or it would be better if I start there. First home route created. And I'll commit this up so that it doesn't go away. And I'm pretty sure, let's just sync the changes. I am sure I am on the latest branch, otherwise who is? But this should be up and running within a second. All right, looks good now. And now we can go back. All of our changes are there. Now, only thing I have to do is npm start. Reason for that is really simple. In the package.json, I have modified my script to start. Whenever I say npm start, it runs index.js file. It would be rather node index.js. So that would be better. We can say node index.js. So that will be helpful for us. We'll save the changes later on. And as soon as I do this, it says server is running at port. I can open it up in my browser and there we go. It's going to be forwarding a port and we can see server is up and running and we have to verify a couple of things here, validate them so that we learn. The first thing is in the entire application, I have never hard coded the values. In the index.js, it was able to get this port value from the environment variable that we set it up. So these values are coming up from there. So that is one nice thing. Another thing is if I look at the port, notice here, they are forwarding my port on 4000 directly. But notice here, if I take this one, which one? Not this one. Yeah, this one. I copy this and let's try to open an incognito mode and I run this and let's see what happens. No, nobody is able to access this until they are logged in. So good, but not good. We can actually go ahead and click on this private variable, right click on this one, and we can change the port visibility from private to public. And now anybody who has access to this URL should be able to grab this. So you can just click on this one, which copies your local address as long as this container is up and running or the code space is up and running. Now we can open up another browser, make it up and running, and there we go. We are able to access that. So depends on what you really want to do. You can configure this one. I think right now nobody's listening to this, so making it public and private is not going to be bothering much. And after finishing up this tutorial, I obviously will close this one. So the code spaces will not be running. But you get the idea why it is forwarding on default. It is smart, so it sometimes takes your application that where the port is listening and all that, it automatically opens it up. But having them into dev container makes life much more easier for all of your developers that, hey, the forwarded port that we are using is 4000. So configuration file always are better. All right. So this is what we have configured. Now, one more thing I would like to show is we have actually forgot to add the package.json. So let's just go ahead and save the changes. And we'll be saying fixed package for node index run. Yeah, not really the best of the commit message, but we got that one. Now I can come back on this one and I can hit a reload. And now you can see there are a lot of commits here. You can go ahead on to any commit and can see that file how it was looking like at this particular point of time. And you can go ahead and work on with that. So really fantastic. All of your commits and all of them. In fact, you can create multiple branches and can move on into multiple branches up here. Everything that we are doing is just going all up here. So really fantastic one. All right. So this is the basics that we have. Now, one more thing that we would like to do is move away from this code space. And let's see what happens when we actually go ahead and close this tab and move on to this one. So I'll just stop it first. At least that's what I can do. Otherwise, it will keep on running. So I'll just stop this one. And let's do something really interesting. We just accidentally closed this entire tab. Okay, that's not great. But let's see what happens. I go onto this repository and I click on this code. And you can see there are current branches, main and main one changes in all of these code spaces. So this is active and this is active, super giggle. So a couple of these ones are active. And I can always go ahead and look for the code spaces that I have. And I think the URL is code spaces simply. So simply code spaces. Yep, there we go. And we can see there are two of the code spaces which are running accidentally, of course, not intentionally. There is one change on the main and there is some uncommitted changes on this one. Let's see what is happening. I can go ahead and anytime delete the code spaces or stop that. Let's go ahead and delete them just like that. So we'll just go ahead, delete this one and delete this one. We have a lot of time. 60 hours is really too big, but you can actually easily consume that pretty easily. Now let's go on to the profile page and I would love to spin this again. So I'll check my repositories. Yes, this one, go up there. And let's spin up a new code space. Let's see what happens this time. Create a code space on the main branch. Let's see what happens and how much time is it going to take this time. So should be fairly faster as a process this time. Let's just wait for a second. All right, so it took a little bit time, but now the best thing is that there are a lot of things installed already onto this one because of my dev container file. The more I add into this file, the more settings I give it. Notice the port is already there, so everything was saved. And these are my configuration for container. And notice I still have the node-v. I get the node version 16, which I installed. Yes, I have lost the settings of my editor, but you can push that configuration also using the dev container. There are ways for that. But I think everybody has their own style of fonts and everything. So I don't think so pushing that would be really a great idea. I would love to configure that every time because some developers don't like the big fonts. Some developers like to have big fonts. Depends. I'm teaching, otherwise I wouldn't be using this much of a big font. So yes, so I'm going to go ahead and say terminal font, and I'll be using something like 22 here. So there we go. So again, not really a big deal, but I can see that this is now fast paced and I can see all of my changes being preserved and I can keep on working with that. So yes, that is a fantastic one. So we have gone through now that we understand enough of the GitHub code space that we can go ahead and work on with that. All the basics and necessities are there, but I would like to keep on working on this tutorial so that at least I can walk you through more details, because some of the development things you cannot actually go ahead and understand just with the basic settings that all are there to walk through. When you build your application, you realize that I need this, where is the setting, how can I add this? There are a couple of more settings which I will walk you through. But we're going to do this much in this part. Continue with the next part. I hope you are going to hit that subscribe button as well. And surely it's a fun thing. Let's go ahead and catch up in the next video. Hey there everyone, Atesh here, back again with another video. And in this video, we are going to continue the process that we have been doing with the Codespaces. GitHub Codespaces is one of the fantastic services. I don't have to really worry about my code. It's always all the time saved in GitHub. It can be easily accessed by people like you for whom I make the tutorial, and I explored it a little bit more. I tried that how can I make a developer's life easier, especially the person who is watching it. So what I've done is, let me show you that. I actually went into the configuration file of this dev container so that maybe somebody is forking this entire repository and want to just spin it up as a code space. So how can I make his life a little bit easier? Of course, the very first thing I did is post create command, because once actually you run this, your npm install or your node module folder is not there. So you cannot instantly just come up and say, hey, npm start, and it's not going to work. So you need to run an extra command, npm install. We are all pretty much aware of it. So I run that as a post create command so that you don't have to manually run it. On top of that, I have created this customization. Had to look up a little bit more in depth in the documentation. Not yet used to with that. There are a couple of customization settings that actually you can work on with. If you just put up a comma and I put up enter, notice here, you can put up customization for Codespaces as well as for the VS Code as well. I have put up the settings for VS Code, so I'm going to just remove it. There we go. So what I'm going to rebuild this container, because the settings I have just enabled that. We'll do that later on. So what I've done here is really simple, that I have added an extension. So there are a couple of extensions. I wanted to try it out, that maybe somebody comes up, he loads up that extension automatically. So notice here, all the extension that I wanted, they are here. How I did that, you just write a simple new key value pair extensions, which is an array, and in which you can write comma separated values. In case you want to add more extension, just click on the extensions tab and just look for your favorite extension. Probably these are already installed for me. So maybe an extension for React. So I'm pretty sure there is some extension for React, maybe React, something like anything. Just wanted to show you the syntax. So maybe this is the one you are looking up for. You can just click on this and grab the extension ID. Once you grab that, you simply go up into dev container and simply go ahead and paste it up here. That's all. There are a couple of modes. These are extensions. These are settings. And if you put up a comma, notice here, there is a dev port as well. You can mention that which is the development port you want to open up. We have already gone through with that. So this is forwarded ports. That's dev port, which one you want to open. Another important setting is settings, because it was a little bit difficult for me for teaching purposes that the editor font is always like 12, which is too small for the teaching and videos. And the terminal font also needs to be a little bit bigger. So I've embedded these settings Now, whenever anybody spins up these machines as a dev container after forking it, they'll get all the settings out of the box. I tried to stop my container, rebuild it, and it works out of the box. So fantastic one. Now, the goal of this video is really simple. That this is not the goal actually of the video. The goal is really simple. We have learned that we can actually serve this. That is fine. And by the way, let me show you my this terminal as well. This looks pretty nice, big font. That's exactly what we wanted. Now, what I want to do further is I want to have a MongoDB Atlas, and through that MongoDB, I want to connect and see that how I can actually manage all these things within just the browser and the GitHub Codespace. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, I would like to keep my folder of database connection as a separate. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, let's go ahead and make a folder, call it as simply database, come on. Database, there we go. And inside this database, let's create a file. We are going to call this one as database again, database.js, but this file needs to go inside the database. So let's go ahead and move it inside the database. And database.js. Feel free to call it whatever you like. I like to call it as database.js. Let's see how we can do that. Already we have installed the Mongoose. So Mongoose is going to help us in doing that. So let's go ahead and call this one. I think we have installed the Mongoose, or I'm just running ahead myself. No, we have installed the Mongoose. All right. So we're going to say that, hey, let's give it a Mongoose. So we're going to say Mongoose. That will be require. And we'll be saying, give me Mongoose. Once we have Mongoose, then we can actually go ahead and install that. Obviously, one very, very important thing is my code space should have this URL. So I'll go into settings and I can see here are all my secrets are. Codespace secrets, and the port secret is already logged. Yes, 2 days ago. I need to add another secret. I'll walk you through how we can do that. I'll do that a little bit off screen just to protect my keys. But obviously we will have a key. We're going to call this one as MongoDB_URL. Feel free to call it whatever you like. And we will grab it from process.env. It's a long, big object. We can grab any keys, what we like, just like we grabbed the port here. Once we have done this, then we're going to simply would like to export this so that other files can use it if they want to. So we're going to go ahead and say, hey, exports, I'm missing an S, exports.connect. And this will be a simple method. So let's go ahead and fire up an arrow method or arrow function in case somebody is getting bothered with that. Now, Mongoose is really, really super easy to connect with the database. So all you have to do is mongoose dot, and you have to say connect. That's all it takes. Yep, that's it. It takes 2 parameters. In fact, it takes a couple of more parameters. You can search for that. But the major one is URI, which is your URL for locating that database, which is a string format. Then we have a couple of options that we can provide, and optionally we can go for a callback as well. So really simple. First of all, let's go ahead and provide this URL. So MongoDB URL, whatever that is. Then we'll provide a couple of options. I'll walk you through with those options as well. And then we are going to go ahead and provide just a callback. We can go ahead and provide a callback. There are a couple of ways. Providing a callback is also fine, but these database connection might fail as well sometime. Here, I don't want to inject a try catch because this is just an initial and crucial operation. I would say that if everything goes right, then just give me a console log. If doesn't goes right, I don't want to move forward in that case. So that's my goal. So I'll use it dot then and catch. So here is my then, and here is my catch in case everything fails. First, let's handle the fail part because it's easier. This catch and fail both, this then and catch both gives you a callback. So here we go. There we go. This is a callback. This one will additionally gives you error because obviously you are handling the error. Now let's see how we are going to handle the error. We are going to first go ahead and say that DB connection failed. So something like that. DB, or let's write it in lowercase. DB connection failed should be in uppercase. Looks like somebody is yelling at us. And then we can go ahead and put up another console log. There we go. Console log. And this might be dumping down the error or maybe error.message. So whatever that is, we need to actually check out first by doing a console log that what kind of error is and how we can extract the message from it. Okay, and then we want to use a process, which is an inbuilt node process, and we don't want to proceed further. So we have to use an exit. This exit takes 2 parameters. If you go ahead and hit control space to find out how we can actually work with that. So this is the process. It's not working out. So we can actually click on this one to find out what this is. We have to provide a code, which is going to be a number. And this number is usually between either 0 or 1. You can read a little bit more here. You can find it in the documentation as well. So when you simply go ahead and say 0, that means, hey, nothing goes wrong. I really want to exit this process. But when it says 1, then server automatically knows that something was bad and we should be worried about that. But that's exactly what we want to do. Now, remaining part about these options, you're going to find in every single documentation as well as on the Stack Overflow that there are 2 compulsory methods to pass out up here. So the first one is use new URL parser. I hope I wrote it correctly, and that goes as true. Now, you don't have to worry too much about that. What happened is MongoDB actually was working with a different style architecture in their document, and then when they updated after version 5, they actually moved in a tiny bit of new methods and approach and all of that. So that's why what they ask you to do is provide these 2 things. One is use new URL parser and use unified topology. You don't have to give it too much of the depth as long as we are not talking about MongoDB series. That is all you need. Now, the important thing is that I'll just verify this again if I haven't made any typo. That looks great. All right. So the only thing that's remaining now is to have this MongoDB URL, and I would love to walk you through with the part of how we can actually go ahead and do that. So here is another browser, and all you have to do is look for on the Google, which is MongoDB Atlas. So MongoDB Atlas is the way. You can go ahead and install it using Docker or whatever you like. In this case, we are using MongoDB Atlas, which is a free cloud-based service. They have enough generous free tier and deploy a multi-cloud. All you have to do is just sign in. That's it. They allow Google login as well, whatever suits you. You can go ahead and work on with that. Read about them as well. I've already logged in. This is the screen that you see after selecting some default options and stuff. And it also gives you a prompt to get started, but I've closed that form and I would like to work with that. So first thing that I'll do is do a database access. I would like to add a new database user, and you can go ahead and use IAM users or password certificate. I'll go with the password in this case. So new user, I'll just name my user as Hitesh and I'll enter a password as well. Not really highly secure, but yes, I remember the password now. And I will just say, hey, I would like to just go ahead and add this one. Now, in addition, if you're using in production, then the settings are really, really different. You might want to contact your DBA for that. I'll just click on add user. And yes, I know it's a bad password. I'll just remove it once I'm done with the tutorial. So here it is. It is being added and it says MongoDB role, all access. So yeah, it has the access of all of that. Then what you need to do is provide the network access of that. So what we want to do is add an IP address. So what IP address you want to give? So I want to allow the access from anywhere. And I'll just say, hey, this will be temporarily. I will delete it for sure. Later on, don't want my database to be accessed everywhere. Only where my code is hosted, maybe on AWS or something, I want to provide only that IP. I'll just hit confirm. So it will take a little bit of the time that how and from where the database should be accessed. Fantastic security rules. And hopefully this should be all good. And it has the access to all resources. That's what I'm looking up for. Let's just do a magic video editing. I think it's necessary here. All right, so it's all done now. So you'll be able to connect with the database from all of the IP address. So yeah, really basic. Now what we want to do is click on the database here. And we want to connect to a database. So we will say that, hey, I want to connect. And this, you have to click on MongoDB Compass. That's how we want to connect, not through the driver because we are not connecting with driver. We're connecting with Mongoose. So this actually gives you a URI. This is the entire URI. And again, notice here at the end, it says test, which is going to be the name of your database. In case you don't like test, you like something else, go ahead and place that. I'll copy this. And now I have to go back onto this browser, have my code secret, and we have to mention the new repository secret. So I'm going to edit my secret in a minute, but first I want to grab the database key, which is this. Don't want to make a mess, so I'll copy this. and I'll place this here. Now, obviously, I have to go behind the scene and save it because this couple of things needs to be edited. So you need to provide the exact password and then what is the name of the database. I'm going to call this one as test. I don't mind it, but I need to change it to the password. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll do that behind the video editing magic. All right, so I have added it up here. MongoDB URL is there, and this should now have an access to this one. I really want to reload the apply to have the secrets and all these changes, but don't want to reload it right now. Otherwise, all of the code that I have added up here might go away. So I'm going to go ahead and add the dev container. Whatever the changes I have made, I want to push them and I want to add the database. So let's go ahead and add a connect message to this one. So database, yep, I want to add this. Yeah, now it's all good. So I'll just say in the database connected, or I'll say app connected to MongoDB. I'll just say, hey, add these commit messages. And I'll say, hey, just sync all the changes. And yeah, just go ahead and do that. It should be prompting me up for a reload, and don't want to do a reload right now, but I think it should have done. All I'll do is just hit a Command R to refresh the entire page. So this will take my code space to allow to set all these variables and all these stuffs. Shouldn't be taking much more time. And notice here, no matter how much I reload and everything, all these extensions and everything gets updated for me every single time. So let me go ahead and pause this. I think, no, it's all done. Okay, should be all up and running. Now let's go ahead and have this. Let's see that if we can go ahead and say npm start. And there we go. Server is running at port 4000. And our process still didn't exited simply because we actually never called this one. So we need to go ahead and call this value as well. So let's go into app.js and inject the database. So just after we have required the .env, I also want to initialize my database. So I'll just say require. And I want to require from /database, and then there is a file database.js, and then I want to run a method. So I'll just chain it up directly here, connect and run it. Save this. Now let's stop this and run it one more time. So hopefully, if we haven't made any typo, things should be all good. So notice here, the URI parameter to open URI must be a string, got an object. So what is happening is we got a mongoose connect. So create connection is a string. So let's see, looks like we have made some typo. So this is coming up as a string. That's something. The URI parameter of open URI must be a string, but this is what they are getting, an object. Let's go ahead and see that what we are getting as a MongoDB URL. So let's go ahead and log this one. And there we go. And we'll say that, hey, just give me this. Or we can just go ahead and say type of, and we'll be just copying and pasting this value. Copy this, paste it up here, and let's see. All right, so let's go ahead and run it one more time so that we can verify what we are getting. So it says DB connection failed, and this is what we are getting as an object. So this is a problem. In the other case, we were able to actually extract it, but this time what we'll be doing is, since this is an object, all we got to do is really simple. Nothing much to be worried. And again, I don't like to edit out these parts because these are the things which actually helps you to understand the things. Okay, all right, let's try it one more time. And this time we go ahead and say a DB connection failed, and it should be a string. All right, so seems like my variables didn't got updated. I somehow forgot to actually reload that. And for that, all you have to do is click on the code spaces at the bottom, or you can hit the Command Shift P. And all I did was rebuild the container. Anytime you add more variables, environment variables or something, then you have to rebuild the container. Now it seems like okay as of this time. I tried it again to run this. It's a string now, which we made a mistake, which you are aware of it now. So let's go ahead and actually do something when the database connection is successful. So right now we wrote nothing inside this then. So let's go ahead and just wrote a simple message for us that might say, hey, DB, oops, connected successfully. Is it correct? Hope so. Don't mind it. This needs to go away. Looks good now. Let's go ahead and try it again, npm start, and there we go, DB connected successfully. So this is officially now connected to the database. But one thing I would like to verify again more is if I am able to have something here or not, because as of now, I haven't done anything in the collection. So there we go. We have nothing, but obviously we want to go ahead and add some of these values up here. So let's go ahead back up here. Looks great. This one is great. Okay, at least one thing we can be assured now is that my database is connected. Okay. So if the database is connected and we also learned a lot about the GitHub Codespaces, why not to just go ahead and build a simple authentication system? It's not going to be very complex, but at least learn about creating a user, creating the tokens, sending these tokens into cookies, as well as a login part, and I'll give you some assignments as well. So that's all we'll be doing in this particular video. And one more important thing is make sure once you're done with this, you really want to stop the current code space. If you don't do that, that means it's going to keep on running into the hours that we really don't want. We want to only use these code spaces when I'm either teaching or actually I'm using it. So that's all what we'll be doing in this video. Let's go ahead and catch up in next one. All right, so far so good. We were able to integrate MongoDB, write some code to have a basic connection with MongoDB. Although we can stop this tutorial right here, but I want to take it one step further so that I can give you some of the assignments and talk in between detail of how things happens in the authentication system. It's not really a complex one. It's really the basic start of it. There is surely a lot of room for improvement, but I'll suggest you some of the improvements and behind the scene as well as assignments so that you can also work on with that. This tutorial will be totally complete when we'll be able to send some data, receive some data, and do some processing in between. That's exactly what we're going to be doing up here. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So whenever we create these kinds of application, we obviously need to build a model first. And model is nothing, it's just a representation of how our data is going to look like in the database, of course, in the MongoDB. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a new folder, and I'm going to call this one as model. There's a lot of debate about it. Call it as model or models. You can go with whatever you like. I'm going to open up my terminal because the best way to create a file is actually through the terminal. Otherwise, your files get misplaced here and there outside and all of that. So this is always a great idea to do that through the terminal. And I'll be saying, hey, go inside the model and what should be the file name? Now, in this case, we are just registering the user. So I'll just say user.js. Again, there is a lot of debate about should we call it as user with a capital U or just users. I just go with the lowercase all of this and with the singular one. So I'll just hit enter. And there we go. Inside the model, we have now this new file user.js. Now for the user.js, there is not too much thing required, and I'll suggest you and refer you some documentation where you can study. So first of all, this entire thing will be based on Mongoose. So this is what we need. And we're going to go ahead and say, hey, I require just the Mongoose. Now Mongoose acts as an in-between layer when you talk from your JavaScript code to MongoDB. You can directly actually interact with it, but it's better to use Mongoose because it adds an additional layer of easeability. Yes, that's also a word. So let me go ahead and walk you through with that. So I'll just go on to this one. So we're going to learn about Mongoose. And if you go ahead and take a look on Mongoose and read the docs, there is a lot of things at how the modeling of the data can be done. So there is a lot of things, not here actually, the Mongoose schema and model here. So you can see there is a lot of things where you can go ahead and look for model, can query it, can get back data onto it. And there's so much onto this. In fact, if you click on the validations, you'll find that there is so much of validation you can do out of the box. So these are the list of all the things. Like if you want to find out that the email should be unique or not, there should be some validation. You can go ahead and play around with that. Reading this documentation is really fantastic. If I'll create a tutorial based on Mongoose, I'll surely go more in depth. Right now, let's go ahead. This much is enough. So let's go ahead and work on with that. So nope, just wanted to close this one here. And there we go. So once we have the Mongoose, then we're going to simply go ahead and create a user schema. This is how you go ahead and do this. Now this schema is, you can name this anything. This is basically just a variable. Then we simply go ahead and say, hey, I want to use Mongoose. And inside this Mongoose, there is a dot schema. And there we go. Now again, it actually sometimes say, hey, I want to use default Mongoose. I have already gone ahead and I should be actually changing it. So that typo, Mongoose, copy that, paste that, and now we can get rid of this line. Honest slight mistake there. All right. Come on, there we go. So inside this is just a method, and inside this method, you can pass on a big list of objects. This is nothing much more than all the parameters you want to insert in your database. For example, we can go ahead and say first name, all lowercase, maybe that's the way. And then you can pass on an object. You can just type on and say, hey, this would be a string. That is also allowed. But you can pass on as an object and can provide more things. Like, for example, I want to provide a type of this one. The type of this data is going to be string, and then put up a comma, and you can add more values. Like, what should be the default value? I want to say that default value should be null. Now here is where the validation actually comes into the picture, and you can try out that what more validation you can put up. Like, for example, you can have your cast errors and all these things, just like this object. You want to add only numbers and stuff. Yes, you can go ahead and read more about them. What I'll do is I'll just make a couple of copies of this one so that we can have. So we'll have first name, maybe last name, email, password, and a token, which will come as an assignment for you. So first name, and then we are going to have a simple last name. This is default string. I'm okay with that. Then probably let's get email. That's also a string. I don't want to have a default. You can have, like, I don't want to have a default in this one. I want to have another property, which is unique, which will be true. The moment you set the unique value as true, that means you don't have to write extra code. Every time a document is being created or an attempt to make a document inside the database is done, then it goes ahead and look for this email field and automatically see that whether this email already exists or not. So I don't have to write extra code. That's the power of Mongoose. And we'll also have the password. Of course, we will be storing this password into an encrypted format. We'll work through with that. And then we simply go ahead and say, hey, this will be string. We don't want to have a default in this one. Now, this one will be token, and maybe in the later on some videos or something, if I'll talk more about the details of tokens or refresh token or something, then it will be done much more. Right now, I want to just put up a comment. This will be an assignment. So we will not be inserting any data in token. Deliberately, we'll be skipping it so that in the version where you are making it, you can go ahead and work on with that. Authentication can be done really into an itself tutorial where I can talk about how the refresh token works, how the forgot password work, how the recovery password works, reset password works, and all of these details. Right now, I think this is more than enough for us to go ahead and work with that. The final thing that you have to do is simply go ahead for module.exports, and you have to export that. Now, there is a very special syntax how you export these Mongoose files. These are not regular JavaScript files that you can go ahead and export. You have to say mongoose.model, and then you have to provide two things into this one. What is your schema and what you're calling this one? So these are two important things. So I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, I want to call this one as simply user. And again, make sure this is always singular. There's a reason behind it. And what is the schema that you're providing? So schema is really simple. This is my schema, user schema. You can copy it and paste it. There we go. The reason for calling it as user always, because when you actually add any schema into MongoDB, automatically MongoDB makes them as plural. So you will not find it as user in the database. It will be more as users. That's it. Really simple. Nothing much to be worried on that part. All right. So this is what we got as user. So we can just go ahead and close this one. Now here, we need to actually install a few more packages and have to work on with this one. So Express is there. That's fine. But we need some data that needs to come from the front end itself. So maybe that's a Postman or anything. So for that, we have to add a couple of additional properties. In fact, a middleware, I'll talk about middleware in the later on videos. But for right now, in this tutorial only. So first and foremost that you have to do is call up this Express and have to say JSON. The moment you go ahead and save this JSON, that means now our application will be able to inject a middleware between. And between the request is being sent and is being processed, now it will be able to understand the JSON format. So that's all it does. Now, similar to this, you can go ahead and use a couple of more packages. I'll show you that as well. Okay. So this is all. That's the basic as of now. Now let's go ahead and create a request and see what we have to do. We have to plan an action plan for that. So this will be app.post, simply post, because we want to accept some data. So some data will be coming up through the form or from whatever the resource is. And let's just go ahead and call this one as a register. Okay. And then we have to provide a simple request. So we are going to go ahead and call this one as request and response. So request is the object that is coming up. Response is the object that I'll send to the user. and then we'll throw up as a just like this. Now, since this is a database operation, that means we have to register a user, make a fresh entry into our database. This operation will happen in the database. And as I always say, database is always in another continent. Now, this is not always true in all cases. There might be in the same VPC, but the idea behind the sentence that the database is always in another continent is to remind you that whenever a database call is being made, it always takes some time. So that is why whenever there is a database operation, something like that, it is common to have an async request. So I just always recommend everybody to use that. Okay. Now, since this is a database operation, obviously there is a chance of failure as well. So we're going to go ahead and simply have a try catch statement. First of all, we are going to handle the error, and then we are going to make a simple action plan of what is going to happen and how it should happen. And again, your action plan of how to deal with the data may differ from mine. So let's go ahead and do a simple console log. I'll just say, hey, log the error. And again, there could be a better way of handling the errors. Right now, we don't want to go into that much of depth. Okay, so let's make an action plan. So what do you want to do? So step number one is get all data. So that is my first step. And maybe from where you want to get the data. I want to get the data from the body. Get data from body. Okay, it might come from the URL as well. We need to see that how that comes from the URL in some another video in our request.params. This is my first step. And then on the second step, we'll say that all the data should exist. So all the data should exist. Should exist, if I can write that. That is the only check we are doing, but you can do more follow-up check whether that the data is in the correct format, the email is in the correct format. But once you understand how this is being done, you can do more checks there. Once this has been done, then we can go ahead and check, simply check if user already exists. Obviously, it's a registration operation, so we need to first check whether user is already registered in our database or not. So if he's registered, we will not move forward. Assuming that the user didn't exist, then we are going to go ahead and encrypt the password. Obviously, we don't want to store the password in clear text format. So that's the second step. All right. So after encrypting the password, what we want to do is save the user. So we'll just say save the user in DB. Okay. All right. And after that, once this is all being done, maybe we want to also generate a token. Now, this is where your action plan might differ. Maybe you don't want to do anything. Maybe you want to redirect the user on login page. It's all up to you. Once the user is being saved, we will say generate a token for user and send it. It will give us a little bit more understanding of how things can be done. So that is a better step. Once we understand the token part, I'll give you some assignment at how the tokens are being generated, how you can send them, and how you can use environment variables for that and whatnot. So we'll be working on that part. All right, so this looks great and fantastic. Now all we got to do is have some action plan. But first, a couple of changes that we have to actually go ahead and make this one. The first one being that we need to encrypt the password. That is the first worry that we have. And also in the register, we are just sending the token back to the user. But in the login, we will also need to store these user tokens into the cookies of the user. And one of the best way is to send server-side cookies. So we need to have some cookie parser as well. So in the next phase, we will understand about a couple of the packages of NPM that will help us to do all of this. Let's go ahead and catch up in the next one. All right, everything looks good. Now this video or this section of the video is going to be a little bit longer because I wanted to cover really a lot of stuff in this one. So our action plan is ready. All we need to do is now understand that how we can actually, first of all, the encryption is one of the challenge in front of us. And eventually one of the challenge will come up is we want to send this token into the user's cookie. So let's see how we can do that. The first one is really easy. You can just use a package like a bcrypt. And we want to use bcrypt.js, not the bcrypt, although that also works. But this is an easier implementation, much more abstract form of how we can do things. And this is what I want. So please search it for me. And bcrypt.js, a really popular one in the community of JavaScript developers. You can see the weekly downloads. A lot of people use it. So this is really easy one of it. Yes, you can use inbuilt crypto module as well, but this one is better. It has a lot more layers to go on further so that we can have better encryption going on. So it's inbuilt crypto module, randomly byte. So all these details you can study. I'll not go much into this one. This is how you go ahead and use this one. So let's go ahead and copy this and love it. Absolutely love it. I can do all in the browser. Don't even have to open anything else. So yes, please allow pasting of this one. So that's the part one of it, that what we need. And another part that we need, I really need to learn the shortcut of how to move into the tabs, because previously the alt tab was between switching the application. Now everything is happening in the browser. I need to learn about how to move between the tabs before and after. All right. So the next one is actually cookie parser. So we have a really popular package for this one, cookie-parser, the second one. I don't know why the search is giving me all the second ones, but this is the one that we need, cookie parser. Again, a really smart package, acts as a middleware. You might have noticed that. And once you install that, it allows you to actually access your cookies. Just like when you see request, if you try to console log that, it's a big object which allows a lot of requests to come up from the user, maybe request.params, that means all data that comes from the URL, or maybe request.body or request.json, not JSON, request.body. Similarly, we can also have a request.cookies just after adding this one. So this is a fantastic package. This is how you inject it, and this is how you use it. app.use, cookie parser, and that's all. So let's go ahead and add this one. So we'll just say, hey, Baker.js, as you're installing this one, so go ahead and install cookie parser. Copying, pasting is always a good idea in this case so that we don't have the mistyping in the packages. Also, I have committed the last changes as well, by the way. So let's see package.json, and we have these JSON web token, cookie parser and Baker.js. So these two are already with us. Let's go ahead and see how we can do that. Okay, first and foremost, how to get all data. All of your data is stored into either request.body, but there could be request.params as well, in case it is coming up from the URL, which is another subject in itself. But right now we know that everything is coming up from request.body, which is an object, not an ordinary object, a gigantic one, and what all data you want to expect from the user to come up. So you can go ahead and destructure that directly and can have this one. We are defining that we want to have a first name, last name, email, password is all what is going to come up. Now, so far, this has nothing to do with the user model that we have created, because this is just something that is coming up from the front end. So my first job is done, get all the data from the body. All right. All the data should exist. Now, this is where the validation checks actually comes up. So I want to check whether all the users are there. So I'll just say that, hey, if there is email, let's start one by one. Don't want to just skip the order, otherwise it's a bad practice. First name, last name, email, and password. So all of this data is there. So just want to have this one. So if all of this data is present, then do something. So I'll just go ahead and replace it with the or sign. So this means if first name is there, or we might have the last name as well. So we'll just go ahead and say or first name or last name, email or password. So if all of them are there, then do something. So all needs to, and you can go ahead and proceed with and as well. I'll leave that as a simple assignment, that which one you want to proceed. You may want to go that, hey, now again, remember this, understand this very carefully. If first name is present, or there is a last name present, or there is an email, or there's a password, I want to proceed if any one of them is present. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments which one is perfect. Is an and operator or an or operator? Yeah, that's a tricky question. All right. So just go ahead and replace them with all, because we want to check all of them should be present. So there we go. We go ahead and say, hey, this one should be and. So there we go. Now we are checking for all the values. First name, last name, email, password, all of them are present, then move forward. But the easier check would be that if I go ahead and select all of this and wrap them up inside a parenthesis and put up an or statement, the negation sign. So now this condition is checking if first it was checking if all of them are present. Now it is checking if all of them are not present. Even if one of them is missing, then it's going to create and jump into the line number 19 of the structure of the code. Really simple. All you want to do is, in this case, we want to send a response. So we'll just say res.send, and we want to send a status first. So let's go ahead and send a status. Status codes are really important. Maybe we'll have a separate video on that. There is a code in case you want to study about them. There's a nice, very clear-cut documentation about this, which is status code, and MDN actually shows it very nicely, very precisely that, hey, here are all these informational code. So in case maybe you want to have a redirectional message, use between 300 to 399, server errors, 500 to all of this, client-side response means client has sent less data, not so accurate data, then use a response between them. Again, which one to use, 400 or 450 or 451, that's your internal matter of your organization. Just make anything as a standard throughout the organization, and that will work. So we'll just say 400 because client is sending the less data, and then we'll be just sending a response. Response could be in the JSON format. Again, depends on what your organization is making a standard, that hey, we always send the response in the text format or maybe JSON format. We do it JSON basically. I'll show you later on how we can do it in the JSON, but right now we'll be just saying that all fields are compulsory. Again, you can write better messages than this one. Okay, if this is all done and all good, then obviously we need to check if user already exists. Now, here is the most important part. You can only check if the user exists or not through the Mongoose, because Mongoose has the ability. So we are already creating this user up here. We have already exported that user. So why not to bring this into our app.js and use everything from this guy, because it has the access of it. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, we are going to just grab the user. So we'll just say, hey, user, feel free to call it anything, whatever you like. And that will be coming up from require. And let's grab it from one directory back. Nope. We need to go into the current directory and inside the model, then we have just one file, which is user. So now I have access to this user. And if you remember, user was an object, like this is this entire export statement, this Mongoose. This user is created from Mongoose. So Mongoose is your database ODM, means it can query to the database. It has access to this one. So my job of check if user already exists can be simplified a lot. How we can do that? We can actually make a query to this one. Again, I told you, whenever you make a database query, always assume your database is in some another continent. So always go ahead and use await in front of all database calls. It takes some time. Okay, then we have access to this user, and user can actually go ahead and query. So there are a lot of query statements that you can learn through Mongoose. The one which we are using is find one. There could be find by ID and all of that. Right now, I'm looking forward to find one. Based on what? I want to check if user already exists or not. And this should be based on email. So let's go ahead, and this is how you query, like you write your where clause, not the accurate statement, but where clause. So I want to search based on email. Now, one thing you need to be absolutely clear, since I'm writing an email here, this email refers to this email, which I got from request.body. Now, if this is true, then we should hold this into a variable. So let's go ahead and call this one as existing user, and let's go ahead and hold this. Now, once we hold this, then we have to check if the user already exists or not. So if user exists, that means we cannot move forward. The user is already registered. So let's go ahead and do a simple if statement. If there is existing, suggest me please. Yep, existing user, then we don't want to proceed. And maybe we can borrow a piece of code here. Or maybe we can write a method to simplify it. Consider this as an assignment. So whenever you send a response, there could be a generalized method where you just send the response code as well as whatever the data you want to send as a JSON or something. So we'll send a 400 response, 401, maybe whatever your organization is making a standard. So all fields are compulsory. Instead of that, we will say that user already exists with this email. So whatever makes sense, you can go ahead and work on with that. All right, there we go. We can remove this one. All right, so we have now proceeded on to this part that, hey, this is how we do that. Now, the next part is how we can encrypt the password. So encryption of the password, we have installed the library, but we haven't actually called the library. So I'll just say just above the express or even after the express, doesn't really matter. We'll say, hey, I want to encrypt the things. So I'll just say, hey, we call this as bcrypt. And the bcrypt is going to come up from require and bcrypt.js. So now I have access to this bcrypt, and I can quickly go ahead and look that, hey, how bcrypt works. Maybe I don't know. So bcrypt.js, and this is how I can use bcrypt.js. First of all, I have to configure. I don't think we need a configuration. Here is a user syntax. So you have to provide a salt and a hash value. And then you have to first require the bcrypt. We have done that. Then you have to provide a salt value. The default is actually the 10, but there could be more. And then there are a couple of methods that how you can actually compare this and to check the password, to hash a password. Probably this is the one that we require. And again, there are a lot of methods how you can do that. I'll show you a really easy way that how you can actually do that. So what we want to use is auto generate a salt and hash. I think that is the one that we want to use. So bcrypt.hash is what we want to use. Then you can provide whatever the password is. And then you can provide the number of rounds you want to go for it. And probably that's it. We can actually have a callback function in case there is some error, but we'll just go with that. So that's nice. Okay, let's see how we can encrypt that. And here is the encrypt password. So we are receiving from the user this password. Let's go ahead and encrypt this one. So we'll call this one as a new variable. But first, this bcrypt is not an easy thing. It's a cryptographic algorithm that runs through, and maybe your server is not that heavy and it just doesn't generate it automatically. So writing an await is always a good idea. So let's go ahead and use bcrypt. And again, the popular method of hashing the password. So hash, and if you just go ahead and look for it, notice it says, give me a string, give me a salt, and I'll just encrypt this one, salt, which is a string, and the number of time. And again, this is an optional. Notice here the or, so you can go ahead and skip this one. So I'll just say, hey, take the password that was given to me by the user and rotate it for the number of 10 number of rounds. So that is what we are going to be doing. Let's hold this into a variable. So we'll just say a hash password, or we'll call this one as my encrypted password. And there we go. So we have this await and everything nicely going on. So this is done. We have encrypted the password. Told you, it's not that much of a difficult. Now it's time that we save the user in the database. All right, let's go ahead and how we can save the user. So again, this is a database operation. Don't forget to put await. Why? Because it's in another continent. All right, so we'll just say user. All right. And we want to just create. So there's a simple method that how we can create the user. There we go. And you have to pass on an object with all the details because it's a user. So model expects what all the fields you give it. This time it is referencing to the model that you are creating. So we'll just go ahead and say, first thing that we want to go ahead is first my field is first name, which is mentioned in the model. And I want to add a data of first name here. Now, always remember this first name is something that I'm extracting from the request.body. But according to the new syntax of JavaScript, JavaScript is smart enough that it can automatically look for that the names are same. So I can just go ahead and work on with that. Similarly, we'll just go ahead and say last name, and we can use the shorthand method. Email is also there. And we have this password. Now, if we go ahead and say this as password, did I mistype it? I'll just select it and see if I have mistyped it somewhere. Nope. All right. So if you go ahead and do this password, it will automatically take this password. So all of our effort of encrypting this password will go in vain. We don't want to do that. And that's why we'll be saying, hey, take the password reference from my encrypted password. So this value is now getting used. Great. All right, but this doesn't actually, this actually creates the values in the database. So we will hold this into a variable. So we'll just say const user. There we go. Feel free to call it anything. Now, whatever is saved in the database and whatever the response we have got, we are storing that into a user variable. So that is it. But we want to also generate a token for the user and send it. Now, one thing you might be remembering that we are not storing this token into this database. We have to reverse the order. So in this case, we actually have to generate a token and all of that. But I'll show you a better way, discuss with that later on. But right now, remember, we are not storing that token into the database. So that is one thing you have to be cautious about. Now let's go ahead and generate a token, and I'll show you some of the details about the token generation as well. All right. So I want to generate a token. Now, in order to generate a token, we have already installed a package known as JSON Web Token, but I have no idea how this package actually works. So I'll just go up here and look for the documentation. So JSON Web Token, did I wrote it correct? Nope. JWT should be a clear one. Nope, I have to write it correctly. JSON Web Token, hope. Okay. So this is how it goes on, and let's search for it. JSON Web Token. The usage is really simple. And there is an example. So you have to say that, hey, first require the JSON Web Token. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. That should be the easiest of all. Come up here, and instead of calling it as JSON Web Token, let's call it as short as JSON Web Token, JWT. And again, the require will come up here just like this, and we'll be saying that, hey, let's go for a JSON Web Token. All right. What are the next steps? The next step is that in order to create a token, you have to use jwt.sign and provide whatever the values are, and then provide this SHHH. This is a secret that you have to provide. The ideal situation is use this secret from the environment variable, so you don't have to refer it again and again. We can go ahead and do that. Now for this, let's go up into Codespace, actually into this. I have to reload this, so I'll do that a little bit later on, so we can go ahead and work on with that. And that's basically it. That's all it takes to actually generate a token. So let me provide you. And by the way, in case you got confused with what this is actually your payload. Means all the information that you want to encrypt into this payload and token, you can just put as much information as you like. Let's go ahead and try this out. Again, code is really simple for that, generating the token. So what I'll say that, hey, let's generate a token. So for that, jwt.sign is the method. There we go. Then you provide your payload. Notice nicely it says payload and in the string format, and then provide a buffer or a secret key JWT sign in option. So there is a lot that you can do. So what I'll do is I'll just hit an enter so that everything is in a separate line and easily understandable. First is payload. Now payload, what I'll say that, hey, I want to extract a user ID. So I can go ahead and call this one as ID in the token, or I can go ahead and call this one as user._ID. Whatever you like to call it, just call it that. I'll just say, hey, let's call it as ID in the payload. That's it. And we'll be saying that, hey, I'll say user._ID. Now from where this is coming up. Now remember this, that we actually stored the user, which got created in the database. Now this user in the MongoDB has a lot of field. Of course, the field that you have mentioned will be there, but MongoDB in addition adds a property of _ID that is uniquely identifiable for every single entry that you make in the database. So this is what the payload is. But in case you want to add more field, you can go ahead and add it. For example, maybe you want to add an email. So we can go ahead and refer, say, email. Now this email, you can bring it up from user.email. That was always a good idea. But since we are doing all of this stuff, then we can actually refer to this email directly, which is given by the user. So again, depends on what you really want to do and which one you think is a best practice. My goal is to make sure that you understand every single line of code of what we are doing, how we are doing it. Then you have to provide a secret. So just put up a comma and provide a secret. Remember, it was saying SSH, which is a bad string. So we should be properly giving up a better string, probably something like from process.env.secret or something. So let's go ahead and put up a comment here for you that, hey, we should be actually using something like process.env. JWT secret, something like that. So maybe you get a reference of how this is being done. All right. So once this is being done, then we can go ahead and say that, hey, maybe you want to add more additional fields. So yes, you can go ahead and add one more field. If you press Control space, this will give you that, hey, what all I can add, maybe encoding, expires in, headers, issuer. There's a lot that you can do up here. I'll just say, hey, add me expires in, and maybe I want to expire my token within 2 hours. This is the syntax you can refer. So this is how you actually create your token. That's all you do. Let's store this token into a variable. So we're going to go ahead and say const token. There we go. Told you, really simple. Okay, oops. Okay, so there we go. So now we have got this token stored. Now how to actually go ahead and keep this token. So what I'm going to do is I have access to this user, which was given to me, but this user has a schema, means it has a model that I've created. And in that model, I have got this token, which I created. It's not coming up from the database. So I'm appending that and I'm storing this token value, which I just generated there. All right. Okay. Also, what I want to do is I want to send this entire user object to the front end. Yes, of course, all information, first name, last name, email, password, and the token, which I just added into this big, large user object. But one thing I realized, I don't want to send this password because although it is encrypted, still don't want to send it to the user. It looks weird. So whenever you don't want to send any field, you can go ahead and refer to that field. For example, password, first name, last name. I don't know why is it suggesting me. Maybe I have 100% made a typo somewhere. That's why it's referencing me. Yeah, there we go. Gotcha. So a password, that's why it was referencing me again and again. Have to fix this typo. So password, and we can make it undefined. So as I was saying, got distracted, that if any field you don't want to send on the front end, you can actually set it undefined. It will not set it undefined in the database. It is just an object that you are storing here into this file, and you can make any property of that object as undefined. It will not send it onto the user. So that's the basic of it. All right, a lot of work that we have done. Now it's time to go ahead and send this entire response onto the front end. All right, so how we can do that? It's simply res.status. So let's go ahead and have the status. Yes, I know this is bothering you. There we go. So we'll say that, hey, everything was great. So 201 or 200 means everything got correct. So this is the status, and we don't want to just send a data. We want to send a JSON response. In the JSON response, you can go ahead and add a JSON object, whatever the data you want to send up. I just want to send this user. Now, additionally, maybe you want to send the token exclusively also, then just go ahead and send the token as an object. So whatever you want to send, you can go ahead and send this one. So this is the basics of how you actually go ahead and run your code in the backend step by step. Remember, it was not complex, lengthy, yes, but not complex. And we just wrote a structure code that what you really want to do, and we just proceeded on that. Now, here comes the debate that, yes, maybe this is not a great approach. Maybe we don't want to send the token. Maybe we don't want to send the user. Maybe we want to store the token into the database also for further reference. Yes, you can go ahead and do that now, whatever makes sense to you. My goal was first to introduce you to the basics of how these backend infrastructures are being written, and at least an auth system. I think we have successfully done this one. All right, let me show you one more approach, because now I think you understand a lot of it. And I think if I can give you an additional plan, you can go ahead and work on with that. So I'll just say, hey, this is my register. Similarly, we can go ahead and say app.post. And let's go ahead and have a simple login route this time. All right, same steps, repeatable, that our database is in another continent. So have an async, we get a request and we get a response. We send a response, but we need a response object for that. And now let's go ahead and figure out. So first of all, I want to collect all the users. So this will be a database operation. So again, try catch is a good idea. We don't want to log into the error much. So we'll just say, hey, let's just go ahead and log the error. Maybe you want to log the error messages, maybe some custom response. You can go ahead and do that. Or maybe we'll build some really complex MERN application. In case you have enough requests, let me know. And we can go ahead and do that. So what is the action plan? Really simple. Get all data from user or from front end or from body, whatever you like to go ahead and do that. Once this is being done, then find the user in the database. So find user in DB. Okay, if that is all done, then match his password, obviously. So otherwise he might be sending the wrong password. So match the password. So password in our database is actually encrypted. So whatever the user is sending it, we have to encrypt it. And thanks to the Bcrypt.js, it will again be same encrypted because we will be using the same secret. So then we have to compare the strings. So whatever user send, we encrypt it. Our database already hold the encrypted one. We compare them. Pretty simple. And once this is being done, then we can go ahead and match the password. If it matches, then just send a token. Yeah, that sounds great. All right, let's go ahead and do this. This should be all super easy now, and we can glide through all the values. Okay, get all the data from user. So we know that request.body holds all of it. Body holds of it. And we'll be saying, hey, const, this is a big object. And there we go. This time we expect that email and password will only come because it's a login route. So that was super easy. Now we forgot to add a validation. Come on. We forgot to add a validation. So we want to check whether both the fields are there. So let's go ahead and add a validation check. Right now we want to use the same validation check just we used in the register form. You can make it more complex. So we'll check that if user or you want to go with or? Nice catch. And we want to go for user, not user, email, my bad. Sorry, email. And we also want to have a password. Come on, don't want to write it here. Password. And we want to check both of them should be there. So let's go ahead and work on with that. So same logic, wrap it up and say if both of them are not present, then we want to send a response. So we'll just send a response, something like that. So let's go ahead and say res.status. And we will say that, hey, this is going to be a 400 if nothing was found. So we'll just say fields are missing or something like that. You can send a JSON response for consistency, but you now know it and you can perform better there. So we'll say email, send all fields, send all data. I know that's a bad message, but you can go ahead and write better message than this. Once this is all done, that means I can find a user in the database. Definitely want to use the same this user for that, for making this query. So all we got to do is, of course, this is a database query. Don't forget that. We'll say user.find1. We can actually use this find one pretty easy, and we'll be finding it based on emails. So let's go ahead and say that, hey, you take this email. And if somebody is going to be getting find out, so we can go ahead and say const user. That will be equal to await. Now, what if the user doesn't exist? I'll give this as an assignment to you. If user is not there, then what? So go ahead and write a code for this one. I'll assume that the user exists. So again, a small assignment for you. So just go ahead and use that. So assignment, there we go. You just check out a condition that if the user is not there, then I don't want to proceed. So go ahead and check that. That's a nice assignment. Now, coming up onto the part is how we are going to match the password. Now, matching the password is actually super easy. You can use await syntax here. Obviously, bcrypt takes time. So we're going to go ahead and say, hey, bcrypt. Now you want to compare. And there's a super easy way. Bcrypt actually gives you the way of how you can actually compare the password. First is foremost is you have to provide the string and then you have to provide the hash value. So I have to do nothing. It basically literally asks you that give me the string and the hash and I'll compare it for you. And I'll give it to it. The password that comes from the user side. And since I've queried the database already, I have this access to user, which will dump me all the database from that is coming up from the database side. And I'll say, hey, there's a password. Since we are storing the hash password, these are all the two things that it required. And it will just do the comparison for me. So that is super easy. Now, the only problem is that we want to make sure that the user exists and the password is also correct. Now, although in case you have done the assignment and checked it, then obviously you can proceed further and hold the result the true or false. This actually gives you a Boolean value. You can go ahead and store this and proceed further. That's a one flow of how you can do this. In case you want to do a hacky flow, not a hacky flow, it's a developer flow. Everybody uses it. You'll find it in a ton of databases and GitHub repository where people publish these kinds of code. So we'll just cut this out and we'll match with another condition. Again, if you don't want to use this condition, totally up to you. I'll say if the user exists, that means, and the password is correct. So I'll just use an ampersand and then we'll use this one. So again, really simple, nothing to be worried about. I'll just use a parenthesis. Now, if the parenthesis is true, so it will work. If it is false, it will not work. So I'll just paste this one. So this entire thing actually gives me a true or false, a Boolean value. You can read that in the documentation. And this also needs to be there. So if user is present, that means database has given me some result, not the undefined or null or something, then I'll go and jump into this match password. So this is doing two things at once. Again, if you don't like this flow, go one by one, if and else, there is nothing wrong in that part as well. If this is all good, I want to generate a token. And I know already JWT can actually help me with that. Hey, JWT, just use a sign method to get me a token. What are the payloads you want to give it to it? So let's hit enter. And the first payload that I want to give is, hey, let's just provide an ID. ID, it will grab from user._ID. Remember, if I'm coming here, that means 100% user is there. So I'm not worried on that part. Then obviously I have to provide other things like what is my secret. So again, we actually have to grab the secret from here. And again, it would be better if I just add this line up here. In fact, I can just copy all of this. Okay. I have to go ahead and provide a better process.env JWT secret. That would be better. In fact, if I can caps this up, that would be better. But you get the idea that why I'm actually giving it. I can actually go ahead and use a better approach on this one. All right. So now, once I've done this JWT.sign, let's store that into a variable. Let's call this one as token. There we go. Now, if I'm reaching at this point, that means I have access to this token. So let's append this because remember, we have access to this user, but this user has encrypted password and token field is not there because we didn't store that into database. So we'll say that user.token will get the value from token. And also I don't want to set the password still. So what I have to do, really simple, user.password undefined. There we go. Now, if this is all done, now comes the important part is send token in user cookie. This is where our cookie parser actually comes into the picture. So cookie parser is a nice, really nice parser. What you can do is you can just install this and after that you have to just require that. So let's do it one by one. and I'll say, hey, I want to have a simple cookie parser access. So I'll just say const, and let's call this one as cookie parser, or all lowercase would be good, uppercase. All right, so cookie parser, and we'll be saying require, and we'll be saying, oops, cookie parser. Yeah, that one. Now, once you have this cookie parser, you obviously 100% have to come up here. It's mentioned in the documentation that these are actually middleware. So you have to write this line so that whatever the user cookies are, I can have an access. So remember, I told you in the middleware section that the middlewares are nothing. It's just something which happens in between. So whenever a request is coming up, the request might be in the JSON format. That's why we use app.use, so that right in between, our app is able to understand the JSON format. Similar to this, now we have the access that now our application should be able to understand cookies, not only understand, but able to interact with them. That's why the cookie parser exists. Once you have this one here, now I have here on this line, have an access that I can go ahead and interact with anybody's cookies. Now, in order to create the cookies, if I go up here, it's not really difficult to have your cookies. Notice here you can have a request.cookies. I highly recommend that. Try out, dump it out, request.cookies, and you can actually work on with that. In order to create the cookies, they actually mentioned that hey, how to create the cookies and all secrets and all of that. They are nicely mentioning it up here, the secrets and options and all that. So option is an object that is passed to cookie parser as a second option, and you can read more for it. And you have to provide values up here. Let me show you. The code is actually super easy. So how we craft the cookies is, first of all, this is actually the section where we are working on cookie section, cookie section. Cookie section. There we go. Okay. So first of all, we have to create an option. Now you can create it within inside that, but it's actually much more easier and much more readable here. So let's go ahead and create an option, whatever you like. It's just an object. There is nothing more. It's just an object. So first of all, we have to provide that when is the cookie expiring. So we can go ahead and say, hey, cookie, go ahead and say expires. It will not suggest you anything because these are options directly for the cookies. So make sure you are cautious on that. So we'll say that, hey, when is going to expires? So for that, we have to provide the date. We'll say, hey, new and date. So this will use an option of date dot now. So this will give me a date of exactly for today. Now the syntax of how we add this, here is a nice secret for that. How many days you want the cookies to go for? 3 days. All right. Then you have to convert that into the lowest unit. So we'll say that, hey, there are 24 days, 24 hours, not days, 24 hours in a day. So multiply it with that, then go ahead and multiply it with 60. So we boiled it down to minutes, and then we boiled it down to seconds. So go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and make it a milliseconds. So go ahead and multiply it with 1000. So now this is the syntax that how you go ahead and do that. Maybe you want to keep it for 1 millisecond, then go ahead and say 1000. That's it. If you want to keep it alive for maybe a minute, so just go ahead and multiply it with 60. So this is minute, this is hours, this is so seconds and minutes, and then hours, and then number of days. Really simple syntax. I hope you will not forget it from now. All right, so this is the first option that we go ahead and provide it. Once this is all done, then provide a comma. One important factor that we want to give is HTTP only. This makes your cookie secure. Not really secure, the cookies are not encrypted, but only server can actually manipulate this if this flag is on. User cannot manipulate these cookies by going into the browser, right-clicking and all of that. So they only can manipulate, these cookies can be manipulated via the browser only. So good options to have. Maybe we can have a long discussion on this one later on. All right, now let's go ahead and send this one. So res.status, everything looks good in this case. So we're gonna go ahead and say 200. And then we'll say, hey, this time, just like we have all these functions, we have access to this cookie as well, thanks to the cookie parser. So we want to send that, hey, what do you want to send in the cookies? First of all, I want to send a cookie on token. The name of the cookie is going to be token. The value that is going to take is going to be token. All right. Now, once this is all done, then we want to send this options. So all these options are being sent. And once this is all done, then I want to send a JSON response. Yes, you can still trail down the JSON option, what all the data you want to send through the JSON. Usually in the production grade, you will see something like this. So there is something like success, always something like this is true or false or whatever the response is coming up. And maybe you want to send the token as well. Oops. Maybe you want to send the token as well. Maybe somebody is making a mobile app. He doesn't have access to this cookies. So in that case, sending the token so that front-end developer or mobile developer know what to do further. Maybe you want to send the user entirely as an object. Maybe you want to do something with that. Or maybe in just one call, you want to send more data. Really, it depends on what you really want to do. You can actually go ahead and do that. So this is all. And by the way, did I wrote it into wrong section? Yes, I wrote everything into my register section. Really bad. Should be making a cut out of it. And this was generating a token. This was a cookie section. So let's go ahead and grab this out, cut this out. My bad, happens to every developer. And we'll go into login section. And we have generated the token. Token was generated. Now let's send it up into the cookie. Actually, this is, send the token in the cookie. So let's go ahead and paste it up here. So yes, this is cookie section. We are creating options and sending it up. So should be all good if we haven't made any error or something like that. All right, so this should look good and we should be able to get the data and everything, all of that nicely. All right, so this looks good as of now, but we still need to test our code. At least let's see if our code actually runs or not in this case. So let's go ahead and say npm start to actually see if we have made any typos or something, or database is getting connected or not. Yeah, at least it is running. So don't want to open it browser, because if you open it up in the browser, this is how it looks like as of now. Come on, open it up. And we have a long list of how this is being built and done. All right, so there we go. So this is our app that is working as of now. So let's go ahead and copy this. Now we can make some queries from the Thunder client, everything in the browser. Love it that everything is happening in the browser. Make a new request. And there we go. We want to make a request to this URL. Paste it up, a really long one. And we want to send a request to register. And we want to send some data in the body. So JSON data. And we'll be sending just first name. And that first name is going to be, let's just say Hitesh. And let's see a post request and see what happens, because we have created a post route. Send this. And it says 405 method not allowed. So looks like a register method is, let's see what all response we are getting. Get, and we want to send a post data. Yeah, that should be, and headers should be all good. Definitely need a little bit of more testing to be done, that how this all JSON content we need to send, or probably we need to use Postman. So definitely let me do some debugging onto this one, that, hey, why we are not getting response here. Again, sandbox, these code spaces is a little bit new, so I need to check this out. But at least we have actually understood what the code we have written here. Definitely we can debug it, so no worries on that part. So let me catch you up in the next video, and let me figure out what is going on all, and let's try some requests through the Postman as well. Let's catch up in the next video. It didn't take it much to actually figure it out. It was all easy. Now I'm actually getting a feel of how to work in the code spaces and stuff. All I had to do is my database or the URL visibility of the code space was private. I clicked on it, changed the visibility to simply public. That's it. That's all it took to actually figure it out. Now I'm sending a request, although the URL is really, really long. Maybe I can put it into a variable. That would be better. So if I can copy this, and can see that how can we actually create an environment variable or something like that. I'm new to this style. I think I'm sure there is a way of how we can create a variables out of it. Should I figure it out already? But let's just say, so there's a collection, environment variable, new environment. Yeah, maybe. New environment for auth. Yeah, that's good. And inside this, we can, yeah, this is good. An environment variable name. Yeah. So URL, paste this one. Yeah, that is link to env file. Not really. And save this. Now probably I can make another request, a new request, and can have the variable. What should be the way to call the variables? Probably same URL, just like we used to do in Postman. Fantastic. Register. And now if I send a request, it says cannot get. Obviously, we didn't set a get route onto this one. Post, all fields are compulsory. Fantastic. Love this URL. And now we can have a body. Let's try it, send a proper request. So we'll just say first name, and that would be, let's just say I register for Hitesh. And then we can have a simple last name, and this can be my last name. Then I think the next one is email. That one would be Hitesh at, why not github.com? I don't have this email, but still, that's good. And there we go. And the last one is going to be password. And I won't be using a secure password. I'll just say HC123456. Yeah, seems decent enough. Let's send this one. And it's taking its time, which is good because it's making a response to database, although our application is not really the fastest in the world as of now. Still, I will give it a benefit of doubt that it's working maybe. Let's see what is happening if still it is able to process this. Probably I need to use some magic video editing here. Let's do this. Magic video editing. All right, so something happened behind the scene as well. The request was taking too much long, and I'll show you the reason. There was nothing wrong in the code part. Actually, what was wrong in that, since I'm actually keep on creating these new users for every single tutorial, this database access, when I clicked on this, there was a user, but it didn't have any access to manipulate any resource. I had to click on edit, go up here and select a built-in role. So I selected click up here, and I had to select this read and write to any database. You can read and write to particular one database, but this is just a test account. I don't use it for much, and have to update the user. Once I did this, then obviously my user was able to access this database. Once I did this, now we got the first name, last name, email, the token was created, and I was able to retrieve the underscore ID, which is a default field of MongoDB, which is a proof that yes, not only we have reached here, but actually there should be something inside the database, and whatever the name of the database, you gave it up there. So you can browse the collections up here. Obviously I didn't change much into this one. I just called this as test, and notice here, users, really important. And I have just one document here, which is saying underscore ID and all the data. Notice our password is actually here encrypted. That's a good thing. So we were able to successfully test out that we are able to get this user up and running. We are able to register that. We can make another request similar to this, and we can try to log in the user as well. Let's go ahead and make a new request. And the same thing will be there. So we'll be just saying, hey, let's go ahead and URL. And say login. So we can make a post request, and we can borrow some of these material from there, copy, and we can make a new request to the body. There we go, all the data. We just need the email and password. So just to check whether all the things are properly done or not. So this should be it. Let's try to send a post request on to the same URL. So send this. Success was true, token was there, and notice here, the user object is big this time. This token is not coming up from database. We actually gave it from the local instance that we have. And now in the response cookies, notice we are actually having this name token, and the cookie is directly present in this one. Maybe you want to send it as an authorization token or something, then add bearer and all these things. So at least by this far, we can understand that we were able to successfully process some data on the database or on the backend. Push it into the database and have all of this thing. So this is a fantastic progress, I think, and we were able to do so much of that. So let's go ahead and close all of this. Yep, you can also go away. You can also, you can also go away. There we go. So this also gives all of this, and yes, this was the error. User is not allowed to do the action that helped me to actually debug this process. The rest of the things are going pretty smooth as of now. Okay, all right. One last thing that we would like to do now is actually make a use of this register and login. So we have registered the user, we have logged in the user, but what's the whole point of this one, creating tokens and everything? The simple point is that nobody should be allowed to access some of the routes which are restricted. Obviously, we could make this structure a lot better, that we could have moved this async into a controller itself. These routes could be moved into separate, but that's for something where our focus is not on Codespaces and just basic authentication, but actually building up a good project. So the reason I've planted the seed in your mind that this could be more organized better, that is the whole idea. This is not the perfect way of, this is how industry works, this is how production grade works. This is more of planting an idea in your head that, hey, everything should be done nicely and all of that. Now, here comes the little bit of the process of one more idea, which is a middleware. So we have already used middleware. We didn't focus much of our attention onto this one, but notice here, the functionality of cookies was not present in the Express. I was able to inject this simply because of one reason. I added a middleware. Can I design my own custom middleware? Yes, of course you can. Let's go ahead and try this out. So what I want to do is I want to use app dot, and this could be a get, and maybe you're designing a simple dashboard. By the way, one common mistake that a lot of people do is miss this slash. This is really important, so don't miss that. And you have a simple, let's just say a simple request and response, and you want that somebody is getting a message. So res.send, and I'm able to send something like welcome to dashboard, something like this. Now, right now, there is no one which is stopping me to access this route. For example, I can make a new request and I can just take this one. I can grab my URL, oops, and hit the route of dashboard. And I can make a get request, send this up. I cannot get dash because this code is not being reloaded. Got this, stop this and run this again. And this is all good now. So we should be able to now make a request to the dashboard. And there we go, welcome to dashboard. So right now there is nothing which is stopping me to access this dashboard. Now, there is no need of writing extraordinary code. All you can do is write a simple code here. That's something like grab token from cookie. Now we can access the cookie. So I can go ahead and do it, grab the access from the cookie. So that is the step number one. In fact, let's do this. And we can check something like this. If no token, then we have to just stop there. If the token is present, then we have to simply say, try to decode that token. Because right now it is encrypted. We use JWT sign, decode that token and get ID. So however we put the token, the ID in that. So notice here, what do we call it up here? While creating the cookies, notice here, this is how, while creating the token, not the cookie, we called it as ID. So grab ID from it. Let's go ahead and do this and get ID. Then after that, query to DB for that user ID. And if we are able to find that user, that means somebody is there in the database, then we should allow that user to have the database. Now, again, we can monitor furthermore that we need to grab the information of that user from the ID and then send it to the front end that, hey, this is the user. So when you say welcome, hey, somebody, welcome Hitesh or somebody, display those messages from that user dot first name or something like that. That's whole another story. But how to do this? So first step is to grab the token. So that should be really simple. The tokens are present in request.cookies. And this is a big gigantic object. So you have to grab the token from it. So all you got to do is say that, hey, I would love to extract the token from it. So I'll just say dot token. And I can go ahead and just store this into a variable. So request dot const dot token. There we go. And by the way, in case you want, it is always a good idea to see what's all there in request.cookies. Cookies. There we go. Now there are a couple of more ways you can actually directly destructure this in case you don't want to write this probably 100 times. So you can destructure that. That's also a way. Again, there are so many ways of how you can do this. Now, if there is no token, so just use a simple if statement here. That if there is no token, we are able to find. But again, there could be more ways how user might be sending the token. So talk to your front-end team or mobile team that, are you sending me the token or should I expect the token that comes from the cookie? Maybe as a bearer token, depends how you are getting that or how you're talking to your front end. Okay, so in that case, we'll send simply res.status and we'll say that, hey, this is a 403. That means you cannot access this. You don't have a token. So we'll be saying send and we can say, please log in first, or maybe a better message. You can go ahead. Now, if the token is present, let's go ahead and decode that token. Now, decoding of the token is really super easy. Decoding of the token happens with the JWT, and JWT can actually use a method of verify. Now, notice here, verify is really easy. You have to send the token in the string format, of course, and the secret that you have used. And that's all it takes. It will give you that whether it was successfully decoded or not. So I'll just give it a token since I've extracted this token from authorization, request.cookies, or wherever I have extracted. And then you have to provide that secret. Again, not a good idea to use the secret like this, because notice here, just to make sure that I'm not forgetting it, I have to copy and paste. Again, the better way is to use process.env environment variables. So here I'll just say that, hey, let's go ahead and give it this. So as long as you're giving the same secret, which should be technically stored in the process.env, we will be able to decode this one. Let's store that into a variable. So let's call this one as const decode equals to JWT token. Now, as you decode this, this actually gives you the access of the entire payload that you sent it up. And it's always a good idea to go ahead and log that what we get into the decode. So that's always a good idea, at least when you are learning the things. So once you have decoded this, what we are going to grab is we can actually directly grab an ID from it. But let me tell you what we are doing wrong. Now, let's just say if we are making this, so far we are doing good. But notice here, this is the dashboard. There might be other page, settings page. So every time you have to do this much of the code in all these files, it would be so much better if we can actually take all of this code and move into a separate file and call that separate file and do this process again and again. And even we don't have to do this process. We can do it as a middleware that, hey, before the request comes up, we can check whether this guy is allowed to actually go further or not. And that is where actually the middleware comes up. So let's go ahead and do that. Really easy concept. There is nothing too much. I'll stop this and I'll say that, hey, let's do a directory. Let's call this as middleware or middlewares, whatever you like. And I'll create a simple file into this middleware that will say auth.js. And again, this auth.js has nothing magical. We just want to access this token and want to proceed on that. Now, so far into this code, there is no dependency except this JWT. So that's all what we'll be doing. So let's go ahead and cut this out. And we'll create a method into this middleware and we'll just move everything here. Now, first and foremost, we need JWT. So we'll say, hey, const, give me a JWT that will come up directly from require. Oops, my bad. Require, there we go. And we'll be saying JSON web token. Now we'll be calling it as method. So const auth, and then we'll be creating a method just like this. So the parameters that are expected are request, response, and I'll work on a little bit more. I'll explain you that. Just first of all, this is the default and we can paste this code entirely. So we have to do nothing. Let's export this auth just like we do regularly. So we're going to go ahead and say module.exports and we'll be saying auth. All right. So one thing we have done so far is there is nothing magical in this code. So far, this is a basic code and it cannot be called as a middleware. Now, if you want to make any code as a middleware so that you don't have to call it again and again, and you can call this just here, yes, you can do that. We have actually a third parameter, which we have never discussed. We call this request and response. There is also a third parameter, which is known as next. Now, the problem with the next, or the feature of the next, is if you have to use it, you have to pass it on. It's like a relay in the race. If you have picked it up, you have to pass it on somebody else. Now, we don't call it here because this is the final end of the response. There could be more thing in between that happens. Maybe you want to check for login. So something like that happens before we do any processing or send any welcome response. Or we can do check if admin. So there could be a lot of things that you can go ahead and do and process in between. So if you want to process in between these things, then you have to compulsorily use next so that chain can follow and can be transferred to the next guy. So that's why we actually go ahead and do this. Now, so far we didn't needed it, so we didn't use it. But in the case of auth, maybe there are more of these such middleware. So we can go ahead and use a next. And I told you, next is like a battalion that you have to a baton, what do you call this, in the relay race. So it's a relay, so you have to pass it on. No matter what happens into this one, you always have to go ahead and pass it on at the very end. So we have to say return next, or just you can say next. You don't need to write return. That's safety. So you can just next. Now what we'll do, this will pass on the chain that wherever you use it, it will just pass on. So for example, you have used auth here and maybe something like is admin. There you go. It automatically knows that, hey, once I'm done executing my code, I'll pass on the working flow to somebody else. This could be here or this could be here, whoever is coming between. So we can actually go ahead and do this. Now we have injected the middleware. We haven't actually imported this up here. So let's go ahead and import this just like a regular file. We'll say auth. There we go. Yeah, it's a shortcut way of importing the files. You just write it, it automatically imports it, and now I can actually go ahead and use it. Okay, so far the code is okay-ish, but it's not gonna work or cut through because we have actually got this decoded token. But now there is a high chance that when you are actually decoding things, it might fail because obviously there are a lot of reasons, processing and all that. It's always safe to do these two operations, the decoding and query to the database into a try-catch block. So let's go ahead and cut this out and try to have a simple try-catch. Error, obviously we'll say a console log and we'll say console log. Come on. There we go. And we'll say error. Now here is the interesting thing. In case there is an error, that means that the decoding of the token didn't happen perfectly. So this is the one step that we are doing up here. So this is really, really important for us. All right. So token didn't got extracted nicely, but no matter what happens, we'll reach to this part of the code and we'll just dump it down here, or we can send a response. So we can say res.send. Again, depends on what your flow is. We have to do a status. Talking and typing, not easy. Res.status, and we can go ahead and work on with the status, which is going to be 401 in this case. You don't have an access to the token. So we'll send a response, something like invalid token. So this entire tutorial is not a walkthrough of how to build a project, but rather how to understand the code. So that's why somewhere I'm sending these strings, somewhere I'm sending these JSON tokens. So there is no standardization I've done. Since I planted that seed now, that you know that there should be some standardization being done. Now, one thing I would like to mention here is we have an access to this request. We added a middleware and then we had an access to something known as request.cookies, which we didn't have in the past. Now, what I can do in additional, I can actually append this because it's a big object. I can add as many fields. I can go ahead and say request.hitesh and that field will be added up here. So I would like to add a field request.user and I would like to set this decode value. So if somebody has passed on through this middleware, now has an access to new field, just like request.cookies has an access of request.user. And whatever the decoded values are there, he will be able to access that. How cool is that? And we were able to grab all these cookies from request.cookies. Cool, really, really cool. Now, if somebody gets a hits of this access, now we have a request.cookies, a request.user and can have all the values. How fantastic and how cool is that? If we were able to do this successfully, let's go ahead and try this out. So let's go ahead and send this dashboard and it's processing because we actually didn't work on that. So my bad. Let's go ahead and run this file first, npm start. And there we go. Just after running this file, we were able to grab this token and the ID. Notice this is all what we were able to decode. This all things come as a decoded user. So this is really, really fun and fantastic one. Now you can come up here and can dump down a little bit more. So let's just go ahead and log that. Hey, now can I get access to this request.user and see, hey, what all this, my middleware was able to access this. So yeah, here, request.user. Let's go ahead and save this. So we'll just saving it. Obviously I have to rerun the database. Should have installed the node mon or something. Let's go ahead and try this out and we'll send a request again. And notice here, we are dumping down two things. So request in the auth.js, we are dumping down whatever the decode value is. And in the requests in the dashboard, we are dumping down the request.user. So obviously this proves the point that these are exactly same data and I have access to request.user. I'm also dumping down the token from the another part of the file. So now if I have to make another dashboard, something like app.get, and I have to say settings. Yeah, that's great. And I go ahead and say request response, and I go ahead and do this, and I say res.send, and I say here are your user settings. There we go. Now all I have to do is, first of all, restart my server because I didn't use the auto reload or something. I can make a request to this user settings. So I can go ahead and say settings. I can make a settings. There we go. It says here are your settings. So anybody can access this. But the moment I go ahead and inject one more parameter here, notice here in the app.js, now only the logged in, if I want that, hey, this route should be accessed by only logged in user, all I have to say is auth. That's it. Then only logged in user will be able to access this. You will be able to access it right now because you have cookies. And if I go ahead and look for this, notice here in the cookies, we have no cookies right now. Let's go ahead and try this out. So settings, send this. And the response that comes up is, here are your settings. There might be some cookies. I want to clear all cookies. I actually cannot remove the cookies also directly from here because these are server set cookies. So I have to create a logout route and have to set the cookies as undefined. So you get the idea how this is all being done. If you can go ahead and try this out, that would be great. So this is really basic. I'm still figuring it out how to work all these things with the new plugin Thunder Client. So you get the idea how this entire code is supposed to run, or in the ideal case, it's supposed to run. So you get the idea. Now you can go ahead and work on with the a route, which is a simple logout route. All you have to do is make the cookies undefined. In case you face any problem, try to Stack Overflow that. So this is all I wanted to show you into this, that how things are actually going to go ahead and work out and run with that. I highly recommend you to take a fork of this repository and try to update this. Try to make it more consistent, that you have a common method, the controllers are being separate. It would be great exercise to add another route, which would be logout route, which actually clears the server-side cookies, and there is more. The goal of this tutorial was really simple. It was not to build a standard approach to website or a functionality, but rather to give you a basic idea of how actually code works, what thought process needs to go behind the scene. It was a very beginner focused tutorial, but I hope you have enjoyed this one. And that was the only goal with this tutorial. Now I'm going to close this code space and I have to go here, Codespaces, and I'll just close it down. First, I need to push all of this. Otherwise I might have lose all of these things. So yes, please push all the changes and I'll call it a day. So final code with assignments. There we go. I'll just commit it up. And there we go. So all the code is available to you on the same repository. And I can just close the browser tab. How fun it is. I can just close the browser tab. That's so cool. And I'll just say GitHub Codespaces. And make sure you don't forget to actually close all of this or stop. I don't need it, so I can just delete the entire code space. It's been done. And that's it. Sure, you. Entire tutorial was done within the browser. Haven't used anything else. So good, so nice to have it. All right, so this is all what I wanted to show you, that how these middlewares and everything works. I hope you have enjoyed this. I'll also bundle this entire tutorial in one go so that you can, if you want to watch it in one shot, you can go ahead and do it. That's it for this one. Let's catch up in the next one.